Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more overly sarcastic productions, and we are here with Red's newest trope talk. Welcome to Super School, which is not just talking about, superheroes like like Marvel and stuff like that, or Sky High, underrated movie, but also like in terms of just any sort of magical school where you go to learn. Now, before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Welcome to Super School. Now, I actually really loved this trope this trope is fantastic. This is a fun trope to do because it is a very easy way to really get some world building slash also in a pretty kind of relatable environment. The school environment and the annoyance we have with it and all of that, or to make the super school kind of something that like that's a school I would have loved to go to, that sort of thing. It's like there's more to it than just being an ease of access to understanding the world and the magic within said world. Slash also maybe how the power scaling will work within the world. But I really loved how this was done in the Poppy War. I actually kind of wish that the first book was more about the super school that the main character Rin, or Fang Runin, goes to. I wish it had been like kind of the whole book, but it was just like I think half of the book or something like that. I can't remember. So not too spoilery. I can't quite remember how much of the book was filled with it. It was filled with the super school, but a good chunk of it. It was enjoyable. It wasn't like dragged out, and perhaps that's why, so I'm left wanting more of the super school, instead of wishing that there was less of it in that book. But anyways, yeah, RF Kwong did a fantastic job with her super school in the Poppy War. I have not read Babel yet, which I believe is another sort of super school. I think it's set in a school, and there's magic, so maybe it's the same. I've not read Babel yet. I plan on it. But anyways, yeah, let's go ahead and dive into this trope. I have not written this trope yet, actually. I don't know if I ever will, just because I don't know, I'm trying to think of how I'd want to, what kind of story there would be to tell in that, and I think within my world. No, actually, I think I do have an idea now. Now that I am thinking of it actively, and not just like passively, I think, no, I think I've got an idea. Don't know when I'll ever write it, if I'll ever write it, but for now, I think I do see a sort of avenue of approach of like a story that I would want to tell with it. But anyways,
There's something a little funny and a little more horrifying about how one of the most common stress dreams for adults and kids alike is to be back in school, unprepared for a test, or somehow forgetting an entire
yeah.
class commitment, or brutally disappointing a teacher, or somehow all at once. I know I've had all three flavors of nightmare at one point or another, and I graduated fully 5 years ago. I did my
5 year. Okay, so red is. See, if I had graduated not a semester late, because I was very like, I only did like 12 credit hours, the bare minimum to be full time at my university. I did that because it was the easiest kind of workload to manage. So I also balanced the most amount of money I could receive from financial aid, right? Um, you're right. So scam the system. Let's see, it's 2023 now. To the end of 2023, I would have graduated, well, 2 years ago. Spring of 2021 would have been if I had just done the traditional 4. So Red is 3 years older than me, assuming that she also did not graduate late.
Time, earned my grades, got my fancy piece of paper that says I know what a Markov chain is, I'm free now. But it makes sense that my subconscious hasn't really caught up with that. I spent nearly 2 decades shuffling from one rigidly scheduled cavalcade of expectations to another, my so-called free time still defined by homework and test prep. Almost 80% of the time I've been a sentient person for has been spent in the structure of school. It's completely reasonable that my brain has a lot of muscle memory about it, which might help explain the enduring popularity of the fictional setting The Super School. One of the foundational principles of writing is the adage to write what you know, which
A popular principle in writing is to draw on personal experience to give the fictional version more depth and detail.
encourages writers to draw from personal experience as they construct fantastical, speculative, and broadly fictional stories to play with, because writing drawn from things the author is personally familiar with has the tendency to be more vibrant and immersive than a completely fantastical concept being built from the ground up. And of course,
Again, when we talk about the write what you know trope, that doesn't mean to be super literal about it, as in only write what you know. It is my perspective on it is that, right, like if you are writing through POV, you kind of want the eyes in which you look at the story should be through the eyes of somewhat similar to you. Like, I would not be writing a anti-imperial story through the eyes of a colonized person. That would be one kind of wrong of me to do, because it is not that is not a story for someone like me to tell. But also too, it's gonna be missing a lot of depth, right? You go and read R.F. Kuang's The Poppy War trilogy. There is depth there that just R.F. Kuang understands, because that is her lived experience as a Chinese American. That was her life, right? There are subtle things that she can just write in, probably without, she probably didn't even give them much of a thought when she probably put those words down on paper. She was probably just like, yeah, this was something I'm familiar with, and just fucking wrote it down, and moved on without much second thought. Then you're reading and you're like, damn, that adds so much more depth to the situation here, right? Because you're analyzing the text, and maybe that is not the lived experience that you have. To you, it is likely going to me, it tends to stand out. I feel like there are still a lot of things that are probably slipping under the radar because of the experience that I have in life. This is turning into a different trope talk, but it is something that I think should be talked about. Or like a story of a gay character coming out in a world that is homophobic or something like that. That is also not a story for me to tell as mostly straight white man. Right? Not really an experience that I have as someone who I dated one non-binary person. That's it. And it was only one date. That was it. So like, someone that pretty much has only dated women. Right? Not an experience that I need to really, that I have or probably will ever experience. But an anti-imperial story through the eyes of a character that benefits through that system, but still wants to like make positive change. That is certainly a POV that I can write. Right? That is the lens in which I can tell, say, an anti-imperial story, just as one example of a theme within a story, right? I can also write the POV of a character of the lower class, wanting and desiring violent change. Now, would me real life probably take up arms? Probably not, because I'm a fucking coward. But it is still a feeling that I can understand and write through as someone as someone from not a lot of money. I've been very fortunate in my life with where I live, but not someone that has excess cash. so that writing from the perspective of a lower class, but still through the lens of, again, if it is that motion notion for class changes within the same world as the one that has the anti-imperial theme within it, I will still be writing. Then that is I will be specifically writing a more niche POV. That POV being of a man. Could also, you can still write through the POVs of women, but they still also have to be pretty particular to your lived experience in certain ways, right? Um, and then, of course, if you're going to be telling a story that is sensitive like that, then you should be getting and hiring sensitivity readers, someone who has that experience, to help you write your story, things like that. That was a long enough tangent. I don't think we need to stick on it. I think I talked about. You can go watch the trope talk on Write What You Know. I am sure whatever Red said in that video is probably what I also agree with and am on the same. Probably whatever Red says is largely what I also believe.
It's also frequently advisable to write a story with a setting that your audience can understand, and maybe even imagine themselves in, enabling a story to pull double duty as a form of imaginative escapism.
I was saying that at the beginning of the video.
Writers aiming at a YA or younger audience are frequently drawn to one of the easy cold reads for that age range. Those kiddos probably know a thing or two about going to school. But setting a story in a regular school is a risky play. Most kids look to stories to think about anything else but school, and it's just...
I really need to reread The Hunger Games, because when we're watching, when you think of typical YA, you really don't fucking think of a setting. You don't think of Hunger Games, but yet that was classified as YA. But every time I think back on the Hunger Games and the content within the Hunger Games, I'm just like, how is this YA?
Generally,
I love the Hunger Games. I wanted to be clear. I have grown to have a great appreciation for the Hunger Games. I did not like them when I read them initially. I liked the first book. I did not like books 2 and 3, mainly because at the age that I read them, the things flew over my head. The meaning and purpose behind things that were happening within the story just flew over my head, and thus I didn't like them. But now that I understand them, and understand the story that was being told, I have an appreciation for how well that story was told.
Accepted that most people find school to be a mixed experience. The tropes of the mundane school life are a handful of high highs and a lot of low lows.
I never experienced the desire for the big game. No one was ever fucking stuck in a locker. In my conform thing, yes. Never was late. I'm always early. Detention never got it. Food fight never happened. Jocks versus nerds then was not a thing at my school. Mean girls, didn't have to deal with that as a man. Stealing answer, no, it wasn't a thing. Pranks, also no. Field trips, only really went on a couple of them. Prom, yeah, went my senior year. Honestly, if I could go back in time, I probably wouldn't have gone. This was not my thing. That kind of big thing, not my vibe. Summer vacation, I do kind of miss that. I do. That was always like a good vibe. It was just like a good brain reset. Though it did always suck coming back in August and just having forgotten fucking everything.
And the highs tend to be things like prom or the big game or graduation or summer vacation, notably the parts of school that are conspicuously not school. The tropes of school itself are generally very unflattering. The cafeteria food? It's gotta be nasty. The homework? It's exhausting if the heroes even do it, and a recipe for trouble if...
Y'all, I don't... Honestly, yeah, my school would have nasty food. But it was always... It was like the pizza and the there were two things in my school that were always good, though, or at least always at least I look compared to the rest of the school experience, they seem to be better than everything else, and I look back fondly on those foods. There was this section, it was called the hot food section, I think. It was essentially where that was the section where the government, has the schools, like, this is where the people that are on low income people, that's where they go for their free lunch, the hot lunch, right? It would be a full sort of meal, right? You would have, like you'd get a pick of a fruit or like a juice cup or something like that. Um, or you'd get like an option of like two sides, like a fruit and then blah blah blah. And then there was a main meal. I would always get it if it was like mac and cheese, and then you'd also get like a thing of bread to go with mac and cheese, right? Um, uh, and yeah, I always liked that. I always thought it was not like the best, right? But like looking back, thinking positively back on it, and also I'm kind of hungry as I am recording this video. Um, that food was good, especially when you kind of think of food that, especially in America, when you think of food that is meant to be served to people of lower income, you kind of make the assumption that it is going to be really shitty food because America does not care for low income people. At least at my school, what I remember from that food, because I would go to it as well, because it was also a good value. It was like, I can't remember how much it was, but it was like, in terms of everything, the cost of everything else, it was a full meal for the same cost of, say, like, it was like a buck or two, maybe more expensive than the fucking Bosco's breadsticks or whatever the fuck that company was called with the cheese sticks. Um, uh, or the, or like a slice of fucking pizza. Right? It was only a buck or two more than the slice of pizza, shitty pizza. That was honestly a flip of a coin of whether or not it was going to be good pizza or not for that day. Um, right? So the hot food section, great value in terms of having, even though honestly, kids should not be having to pay for their lunch when they're going to a school, especially because it is a place that they have to be, right? If school was not mandatory, right? Like if you look at like I had no problem, like say at university, if I was at university during lunchtime and I didn't bring my own food to eat at lunch, but I was hungry and I would go to the cafeteria at lunch, no problem fucking paying for that food because that's a different situation. We're getting into a socioeconomic discussion right now. No problem paying for that food because I do not have to be at university. I am not mandatory obligated to be at university for the entire day. I am mandatory obligated from the age of 5 to 18 to be in school. Now, of course, you can technically get out of it, but that's a whole fucking process. And really, no, you're not. Like, if we look at the big picture, no, you cannot fucking get out of school. So, right, food should be free for kids from lunch at the very least, from when they start school in kindergarten to when they're a senior in high school. That food should be fucking free because they are mandatorily obligated to be at the school. Otherwise, they get in trouble by the law. Their family can get in trouble for like child neglect if they do not have their child going to school, right? Um, so we're mandatorily obligated to be a place. That place should provide food at no cost to the people being mandatorily obligated to be there, right? Going to a cafeteria at university is different. I am not mandatory obligated to be there. But then there was also, we had this section where it was like the sandwich. It was specifically the panini line. Get a panini. They had a panini press. Oh God, I love that panini. That thing was it was good. Well, it would either be a panini day or a hamburger day. Can't remember if we'd get fries with our burgers. But yeah, whenever I think back to my lunch experience of high school, middle school lunch sucked ass. High school lunch though, fantastic. Honestly, more often than not, was good. As long as you just didn't go to, didn't go to get like a Bosco breadstick or a slice of pizza or the pre-wrapped burgers. We went to like now of course the panini line. The panini was like the most expensive, like was I think more expensive. I think that thing was like $5 to $6 or something like that. I really can't remember the prices. It's been so long, and the prices have probably gone up since I was in school because that was like, holy shit, like 10 years ago now. Well, it would have been 10 years ago from when I started high school. Holy shit, I'm old. Freshman year of high school was 10 years ago. Oh my god.
if they don't. The reading assignments, boring and confusing. The teachers, usually mean. The classroom experience, awkward and overwhelming. And this bad reputation,
The awkwardness,
while obviously
valid.
dramatized, exists for a reason. Real school, for all its many merits, is an environment that sticks a bunch of kids figuring themselves out from the ground up into a pressure cooker of expectations that they can neither escape from nor control.
Yes.
And when those kids grow up, the good memories and the benefits of their education are often tempered with the background radiation of constant unpleasantness that
Yes.
they went through in the process. But you know what would be fun? A school that wasn't like that. A school dedicated to teaching something you
This
thought
is what I was
rad,
saying
like
at the start of
magic
the
or
video.
giant
Ah,
robots.
Red, you
A
are
school with a
validating my
sky-high
thoughts and
budget for
feelings.
field trips and good cafeteria food and gorgeous walkable campuses and clean, expansive dorms. A school that would guarantee you an exciting future in something glamorous and fun like magic or giant robots. A school that didn't keep you from your adventures. A school that was an adventure. A super school, you might say. The super school is an extremely common setting for kids in YA stories with fantastical premises. It's a fun wish fulfillment location for our hero to spend most of their time in, and it's conveniently populated with a huge crop of characters that share an age and an interest with our protagonist. The super school is great from a writer's standpoint because it provides a starter set of everything a story needs in one convenient package.
Yep.
Friends and allies that don't need individual
The
motivations
stuff I
to
was saying
justify
at the
them sticking
beginning.
around in the
Oh,
plot, enemies
yes,
of all
I
flavors and
nailed
power
this
levels,
trope
from
talk.
neighborhood bullies to cruel teachers to legitimately dangerous outside context threats, powerful mentors with a decent chance of actually surviving the school year, an extremely convenient avenue for exposition in the form of classes about whatever makes the school unique, trials and tribulations, conflict and resolution, the expectation that our heroes will be learning and growing the whole time they're there. It's all very useful stuff.
It
and it's
is a very
conveniently
good trope
bundled
for all
into the
these
very
reasons,
format
yes.
of the school setting. They may as well hang a sign over the door saying, "Now entering Hero's Journey Step 5." Essentially, setting a story in a school provides the writer with a gift-wrapped assortment of storytelling basics. A supporting cast already aligned with the protagonist's interests and goals, an outlet for world-building exposition, a potentially endless march of lessons to learn and challenges to overcome. In a more freeform story, it takes work to assemble a squad of protagonists all united by a common goal, and to keep them together in the long term. It takes work to explain why a mentor is trusted to guide the protagonist and why they can't solve their problems for them. It takes work to exposit the setting's world building in an organic and natural way. It takes work to introduce new characters and introduce them into the plot going forward. A lot of back-end logistics need to get done to hold a story together in the equivalent of an open world setting. But if you set the story in a structured environment that is literally designed to challenge the people in it, you eliminate a lot of those narrative difficulties right out the gate. Of course, there's a trade-off, and that trade is freedom for formula. Stories set in super schools may have a lot of the setting and establishing work done for them at the outset, but as a result, they often hit a very consistent set of story beats along the way. With
Yes.
a super school, an audience can pretty quickly start predicting what they're gonna get. Now, since this trope draws its entire structure from something deep
Yeah, that is fair because again, like even within R.F. Kuang's The Poppy War, when you're within that super school, again, I was also able to like, again, I think R.F. Kuang is a fucking fantastic writer, and she did a fantastic fucking job with her super school. But again, because of the trope of the super school, it is one that lends itself to being more predictable and tends to have very much the same beats that aren't going to change just because also like, right, our own experience of what school is and really a lot of people's ideas of what school should be kind of are the same, really. What a lot of people would prefer their schools to be, especially the people in particular, right? The people that write and read books, what they would like their schools to be, kind of, kind of line up. So, right. So we get, or like kind of what they would dislike in a school to get that also kind of anxiety kind of connection to it of dislike or whatever emotion the author wants us to feel in towards that school. But right, reading The Poppy War when we are within the school, right? you know what beats are going, right? The beats of that aren't um really a surprise. Though they do happen pretty quick. R.F. Kuang, when she start like she has her moment. This was her first book and series that as a published author. I don't know how many stories she wrote before then. But you can also kind of tell that it was her first story. Um, Published author. It tends to be an issue that I think I also struggle with is when she wants to move on to kind of like the next part of the story, things move very, very quickly. They were a little bit too fast for my personal taste. I run into that issue, I feel like, too, or maybe I'm a bit too slow with getting to certain points. Um, Maybe I think definitely another problem that I have as a writer is I kind of maybe linger too long in certain parts. I don't know how to keep, especially in the middle part of a book, I don't know how to keep things really moving at what probably the best pace. Um, it's a constant learning thing, but yeah, I would still, again, this trope talk is essentially just me recommending R.F. Kuang's The Poppy War to you all because I fucking love R.F. Kuang's writing. I it the Poppy War trilogy, the themes of that, what happened in that trilogy, just has stuck with me a year after reading it. Um, uh, More so than most books, pretty much all books usually do. Usually, I kind of read a book and I can move on from it. Poppy War, I have not been able to move on from. It is just stuck in me noggin.
Deeply, rigidly formulaic, I'm going to take a slightly more linear approach to this discussion.
Rin from the Poppy War is my favorite war criminal. She's the best.
Rather than running through a handful of
Anyways,
different varieties, the Super School has a
what
pretty
this video is
consistent
supposed to
setup
be about,
across settings
Super
and
School.
genres, so we can just break down the beats almost every single Super School story hits. To start off, in the anatomy of a Super School, the beating heart of the setting is the gimmick. This is what makes the school super and sets it apart from a normal and presumably less appealing school experience, and this is also what powers the escapism inherent in the trope. The gimmick can be almost any—
R.F. Kuang establishes that pretty much within the fucking first page, honestly, of our character wanting to study, or I think it starts with the character taking the exam, and then we get a flashback to her wanting to study for the exam or whatever, and we learn a bit more about what that exam specifically is. Right, the first page was there to hook, and then we get the flashback to explain what that hook was. Right, but she establishes the gimmick of the super school before we get to the super school.
anything, but it usually falls into one of three categories: a highly niche field of expertise, a secret world urban fantasy, or a spec fic high. In the highly niche field cases, the school is focused on a real subject. It's just not one that there are real specialized schools for. Students in these settings will be getting an education in something like card games, or golf, or ninja training. The only innately fantastical thing about the setting is that a school this specific even exists. Secret world urban fantasy schools make the super school part of a hidden magical world running in parallel alongside a much more realistic and mundane world. This can be flavored in several different ways: wizards, monsters, superheroes, anything fantastical that's being kept hidden from the world at large. In these stories, the students typically enter the secret world and the school at the same time, learning about the secret fantastical setting at the same time they get their acceptance letter. And in the case of Spec Fic High, the gimmick of the school is something that doesn't exist in the real world but is widely understood in the fictional setting and is a known and accepted part of their reality. Students might attend Spec Fic High to learn about piloting giant robots, or hunting monsters, or flying spaceships, or other fun skill sets that don't have majors in the real world. The gimmick of the school is basically the premise of the entire story in miniature, so it's gotta be grabby. This is why our hero is attending super school, and by extension, what they hope to learn there. Of course, first they have to get in, and this is usually an unnecessarily challenging trial for something that is ultimately a foregone conclusion. If a story is set in a super school, the protagonist is gonna get in. But that means the writer has a free license to make the admissions process as needlessly convoluted and implausibly hostile as they want, forcing the protagonist to run a gauntlet of trials or duels or tests, even though they've often invited them personally to attend, making this all rather dissonant. These tests are also often explicitly unfair, either skewed by a teacher who holds an immediate and irrational grudge against the protagonist, or just deeply unbalanced all on its own. Sometimes they're also secret tests of character that claim to be testing for one thing but are actually testing for another. This gives the protagonist an opportunity to demonstrate their natural talent and skill if they breeze through this blatantly unfair laissez-faire system with flying colors, but never fear, even if the protagonist fails the test, which does often happen to give them a little dark night of the soul as a treat, the highest authority in the school will inevitably step in and let them pass anyway. They'll usually say it's because they admire the protagonist's fighting spirit or heroism or underdog gumption or whatever, but really it's because the protagonist's entry into the school is a foregone conclusion to make the plot happen, and this whole trial is taking place in the no consequences zone, which is why it can be so overwhelmingly skewed against them. The happy ending is guaranteed, even if the protagonist doesn't know that. That's storytelling for you. As soon as the protagonist sets foot on campus, and sometimes
I think R.F. Kuang subverted that pretty well with like the feeling of you know, the consequence of like, you know, she's gonna get into the school, but the why or how she gets into the school is kind of right. You're thinking about that, right? I think looking at, you know, they're gonna get there, but the how and why or whatever of how they get there, right, can change, and that's where you can find your variety within this trope.
Even a little before that,
Or
they will
ways to
meet their
subvert
first
it.
friend. They'll accumulate a small handful of these before the end of the day, but their first one
And also the threat of for Rin within the Poppy War, she is constantly worrying that you can be kicked out of this school at any time. And so, and because of Rin's standing in society, her socioeconomic standing prior to being a part of the school, right, plays a part. So there's that constant threat throughout of like, will she get kicked out? And I thought that was handled really well as well.
and will almost inevitably be an even more underdog-y bully magnet than the protagonist, a lovable wimp in over their head who's being pushed around aimlessly by the tides of fate until the protagonist swoops in to fill her life with the "excuse me, he asked for no pickles" energy they've been craving.
Oh, the character that becomes Rin's best friend in the Poppy War, he's my favorite character within the Rin is my favorite war criminal, but my favorite character within the Poppy War trilogy is the guy that becomes her best friend. He is just, I just love how R.F. Kuang wrote that character. Like, chefs, I love that character.
In the rare cases that this doesn't happen, it's because the protagonist is the aforementioned massive wimp bully magnet, and they're about to be befriended by the hero of a different story. Soon enough, they'll accumulate a small posse of on average 2 to 4 friends, filling some or all of the roles of a typical 5-man band. The only mandatory slot to fill is the smart guy, as one of the friends will be an exceptionally talented student who knows what's up and can explain the setting to the audience surrogate protagonist who has no idea what's going on. Either simultaneous to meeting their first friend or very shortly thereafter, our hero will encounter their first bully. This person will be mean and smug, with at least 2 hangers-on flanking them to laugh at all their jokes, and they'll usually be introduced bullying wimpy friend number 1. They come from an affluent family, are generally desperate to impress one or both parents, and almost always immediately develop a massive personal rivalry with the hero that generally turns into a long-term mutual respect friendly nemesis dynamic that can always be
R.F. Kuang, yeah.
relied on for a little easy character conflict,
Kuang
but it
followed this
sometimes
one to a
speeds into a
pretty
quick
much to a T.
redemption arc for the bully instead, usually when they decide parental approval isn't all it's cracked up to be and being mean feels bad. However, our hero will generally encounter more than one bully over the course of their tenure at school, and they fall into 4 categories. The first, containing the inevitable first bully, are jerks with something to prove. These guys have someone they're trying to impress, be it a parent or teacher or just the other students, and they think throwing their weight around is the way to do it. Less complex but frequently nastier are the garden variety goons, who are just generally unpleasant and mean fellow students who contribute to making the school feel somewhat hostile. These guys are often nameless and interchangeable and exist only to cause problems. Because of that, they usually don't get graced with a redemption arc. They're just generally mean and then they just don't show up anymore. Then there are the ones who are hostile for a reason, characters that have a bone to pick with the protagonist, a reason to dislike them, a thing they're trying to get from them, etc., etc. These guys often turn into friends as soon as that reason is cleared up, but that's not a guarantee. And finally, there are legitimate villains, bullies that aren't just mean, they're actual bad guys, usually some combination of working for an outside villain and or infiltrating the school for their own reasons. These last guys tie in with a broader element of super school stories that is almost always present, the outside threat. Generally, the stakes within the school setting are fairly artificial. A character might be struggling with a test or detention, but the bad consequences if they mess up are purposefully contrived. They might be punished by a teacher or receive a grade they aren't happy with, but it's constrained within a system that is designed to account for their failure. But outside the school are real bad guys that don't care about school rules or regulations regulations and have plans outside of who's going to prom with whom. The outside threat often makes its first appearance by interrupting a class field trip, forcing the students and any attending teachers to use their training in a real combat situation. But field trips are far from the only stock adventure our hero will experience within the safe confines of school. For one thing, there's class. Despite being statistically the thing our hero will spend most of their school time doing, it's actually a complete 50-50 shot if it's ever actually featured on screen, for the simple reason that watching a character sit silently in a classroom while a teacher tells them things is not automatically interesting to watch. But while class might be sidelined, classism won't be. Super schools love having some kind of internal hierarchy system the students can be sorted into, be it dorms or houses or tracks, with one slice of the hierarchy reserved for the privileged assholes and another dingier slice reserved for the scrappy underdogs. Our hero will inevitably find themselves in scrappy underdog house along with their closest friends, and conflict will inevitably ensue. Of course, when our hero eventually breaks the rules obviously enough to get caught, they will find themselves experiencing the school's patented detention that violates the Geneva Conventions. This will provide the conflict for the episode by being somewhere on the spectrum from frustrating to absolutely unconscionable. The danger level of the detention might be increased by machinations of the obligatory teacher that doesn't like the hero, or possibly outside intervention from bad guys, but its base level of badness is often pretty ridiculous, frequently inexplicably so. When the story feels like mixing things up and leaning into the character drama for an episode, the school will put on a big dance, usually something prom adjacent, and let all the protagonists get dolled up in fun outfits and pair off with their respective love interests for some ship teasing. The odds of the big dance being interrupted by villainous machinations are moderately low, but never zero. And those villainous interruptions are no joke. In fact, they usually increase in severity until the story eventually reaches a breaking point of the school under siege. This stock storyline can play out in a few different ways, but in general it signals a turning point in the story where the super school, hitherto a bastion of safety and artificial stakes, becomes compromised by the real threats of the outside world, endangering the students and upping the danger level of the story as a whole. This disruptive shift in the status quo is often traumatic and frightening, as the heroes are exposed to levels of peril that the story previously protected them from just by virtue of tone. It's not uncommon for the school under siege to kick off a plotline where the hero or heroes actually leave the school and start adventuring in the wider world, leaving the pretenses of the setting behind and exploring the actual grand-scale threats that have been hiding beyond the walls. The school under siege is typically a darkest hour, as the heroes realize how truly dangerous the world they live in is, and how much they were being shielded by their teachers and faculty, but at the same time how thin those walls really were, and how ephemeral the safety they promised. But don't worry, when the story needs a grand finale, they'll probably come back for graduation. Now, there's a few other stock elements of this trope that can be reliably expected to turn up in super school stories, but we've run down most of the really consistent bits already. And while it may sound like these stories are very formulaic, which isn't entirely wrong, there's still a lot of room for narrative freedom in and around the confines of this setting. For one thing, a super school story doesn't need to spend all its time in the school. The protagonist can have regular adventures outside of it, with the super school being only one place they go for plot. And outside rules and regulations of the super school, the hero can get up to basically anything. And the consistent parts of the story are consistent for a reason. It really is very convenient for the writer to have access to a massive cast of characters, allies, enemies, and everything in between, just on call whenever they need them because they're all on campus together. And the very nature of a school setting provides the protagonist with an endless parade of small-scale conflicts and challenges.
Exactly. Like, when you're looking at trope, like if you're one of those, I am someone that doesn't actively think of a trope like, oh, I gotta use this trope. I just kind of think of I kind of try my best to just be in the mind of the character and their actions and like what is happening around the world, and think of, I do it more complicated, right? But if you're someone that just like doesn't really want to put like you can write stories that don't require too much brain power use. I like to write stories that are more complex and have a lot of moving pieces happening around the sides because of some of the themes that are within my world. Things outside of you cannot control everything. That one of those being one of the themes that I use. And so, but like, you know, if you're someone that needs a bit more rigid structure to their writing, and so you look at tropes and you're like, ooh, I kind of want to try out this trope or something like that. I'm probably giving horrible advice here because I'm trying to give advice for people that may not write in the same way that I write. I'm very much not a plotter. I fucking just go in raw. But you know, if you're someone that wants a bit more rigid structure with certain expectations in their stories, go for the super school because it essentially gives you everything. It's so easy. It allows you to kind of right away like have be able to introduce characters like really at any time because of like campus life, right? Like there are people that you could share a class with your freshman year, but you never fucking talk to them. But then suddenly you start talking junior year and you become friends. That because you bumped into each other on campus or whatever, or sharing another class. But this time in that class, you are seated next to each other because they were the only two seats together. Boom, instant character connection, a new character introduced. You can hand wave it really easily and explain why that they did not talk before. Whereas other settings, like medieval fantastical settings within like a royal court or a noble, you kind of you do not get to hand wave it as much. You kind of do have to give a little bit more explanation. But like within a school, everyone understands. You're not gonna know fucking everyone. You're not gonna have shared class with everyone before, right? Or maybe if you did share class, you're not gonna have talked to everyone, especially if it was a class maybe that you just did not like. You just had your head down and you were just like, I just want to pass and get the fuck out of here, right? Easy hand wave. So many things to just easily hand wave and have the audience suspend their disbelief when it comes to the super school.
The characters can at any time be struggling with a lesson, prepping for or making up a test, swamped with homework, training, stuck in detention, wrangling a bully, or whatever. The purpose of a school is to challenge its students, so it's very easy for a writer to wrangle a challenge out of the system of the school. The characters will never be bored, so the audience won't either. Right? Right? Well, all these pros come with cons. Episodic also means formulaic, and even if we disregard the problems of repetition in storytelling, the stakes established within the boundaries of the super school are artificial, and can realistically only get so perilous before it becomes implausible that the adults and authority figures are not intervening. If a super school has stakes that are too high and too interesting, it can circle around to seeming both unbelievable and not all that fun. Now don't get me wrong, an escapist story doesn't need to pamper its protagonists with nothing but positivity. Half the fun of escapism is imagining oneself overcoming unimaginable peril in cool cinematic ways, but there's a difference between excitingly dangerous and frustratingly unfair. And if a super school's stakes get too, for want of a better word, mean, it can start feeling like it'd be more trouble than it was worth to deal with it. But of course, if the school's stakes are too low, that just reminds the audience that the whole conflict is fundamentally unreal, even within the space.
And this is actually where it benefits you when you are in a more fantastical setting, especially if you are in a wartime fantastical setting. This is where war, if you're really wanting your super school to kind of be more threatening, deadly, and that sort of thing, have your world be in a war, or the nation that is having the super school be in a war, right? It works for the Poppy War, where they have more dangerous things happening because, well, they are a people that have experienced a lot of war in recent times. They need to be prepared for war. And so this super school is going to be a school for war. Or I really like how the tuning exams are in Naruto, because these are nations that freaking go on war. These people are specifically training to be ninja to go to war, right? They could be genning, fuck, I'm just butchering it. The lowest rank, the one below tuning that I'm butchering. They could just stay there and never be a ninja and just go into domestic life or whatever, right? They can pass the regular academy exams and then just never go on to be tuning. But the people that want to progress and rise in the ranks take the tuning exams, right? So you're not forced to doing it. But once you are taking part of those tuning exams, at a certain point, it's like, this is fucking deadly. You either leave now, or this is like, they establish that, like, you leave now, or this is what you're going to go through. To kind of, but also, like, these are people that have frequently go to war. And as we established with the first arc of Naruto, the bridge arc with Zabuza and Haku, right, we see the kind of missions that these ninja will be going on. So the deadliness of the tuning exams makes logical sense within the world, right? And then we do get a demonstration of, at a certain point, the Jonin, the instructors, will intervene at a certain environment, right? Like during Rock Lee and Gaara's fight, preliminary fight or whatever it was after the Forest of Death. Forest of Death. A lot of people died in there, but right, they intervene in that moment because the rules of this fight is you're not fighting to the death.
Of the story. The stakes are impressing or disappointing a teacher, not anything tangibly meaningful. And more broadly, the characters are almost always going to be at their most interesting when they're outside the bounds of the regular school schedule. Characters actively in class can't exactly do much chatting. Characters between classes can't do much beyond brief chats. So most character shenanigans have to happen after or outside of school, making the primary setting of the story an active hindrance to the plot a lot of the time. Not much more than an inciting incident and a common goal to keep the heroes hanging out with each other. But there almost always comes a time when the heroes leave the super school behind, when they enter the wider world of complex stakes and unstructured time and genuine threats. And that's usually when the story starts getting really good. The characters get the chance to discover who they are when they aren't being defined by scores and grades. They get to choose their destiny, prepared by their schooling for a big scary world of adventure. After all, the one truth of every school is that one day every student will stop being a student and get the chance to be a person instead. And I gotta say, being a person's a lot more fun. So, yeah.
And that was Trope Talk. Welcome to Super School. This went on longer than I thought it would. I didn't make my usual prediction at the start of this where I'm like, I don't think I'll have much to talk about. I avoided saying that, and yet still here we are at a 45-minute-ish long video. I was thinking this was going to be 25 to 30 minutes. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.